Welcome to the Learn to Code podcast here at 1 Month. One of my biggest challenges when I was starting making websites, coding, was that I would spend all night, all week, weekends building and coding and making this thing. And then when I eventually finally got it live, nobody came to it. It was just a ghost town. And it's like the most heartbreaking thing ever because you have a great idea for something, you want to bring it into the world, you tell your friends about it, you make it, and then nobody shows up. And that's because learning to code and actually doing the work is in some ways only half of the equation nowadays. Marketing, online marketing, and specifically knowing how to optimize your site for search engines, which is known as search engine optimization, SEO, is a really important skill if you want anyone to find your site. There's an entire industry around this. And in a previous episode, I spoke with my good friend Kline, who runs an agency here in New York City, where he helps brands basically get to number one in Google. That's literally what he does every day. And he's built an entire business around that. He's built multiple businesses around that. And so he's on the show today. He is one of the leading people in this field, knows so much about how Google works and how it changes over time and some of the tools that you can use to keep up to date. And so that's what we're going to dive into in this episode. It's him and I chatting about some of the tools, techniques, websites that you can go to, as well as some of the coding optimizations that you can make too, because a big part of getting your website appearing in Google actually happens at the code level. And that's also something I teach in a lot of my courses at onemonth.com, specifically the HTML course. Google wants your documents to be formatted with the correct tags, the most up-to-date tags, the fastest tags, right? Speed is really important to Google. There's tools where you can test that. All of this, it's such a big, exciting field if you are launching something and you want anyone to go to it, which you probably do, and so that's what we're going to chat about in this episode. So without any more intro, we're going to get into the meat, into the grease, into the steering wheel, into driving right into the episode. You and me, you ready? Put down the window, kick your feet off, kick your shoes off, keep your feet on, keep your shoes off. We're going to get wild. All right, we're getting wild already. Here we go. This is my episode with Kline on SEO, best tips and practices here on the Learn to Code podcast. Hey, Kenny, welcome to the show.
Good to be back.
Yeah.
Feels like coming home.
Yeah. Today, I want to talk specifically about SEO, search engine optimization, which is, I guess, the way I describe it is things that you can do to your website to help it rank higher in Google.
Yes.
How would you describe it? Anything you want to add to that?
I would say that is true. And Google being the dominant search engine, so there are other search engines out there that sometimes drive traffic.
Okay. We're talking like Bing or
Bing.
I can't even name it.
DuckDuckGo had a nice surge recently for some reason. But if you get Google right, I think you're probably fine on all the others as well.
That makes sense.
So generally I say Google more than anything.
So it's not just Google optimization, it's search engine optimization. It's all the search engines still.
Yes.
But beyond just getting started, there's some things that we can do to optimize. So what's your number one fundamental SEO advice?
So WordPress is just great because out of the box, it has a lot of good SEO stuff like set up that you won't mess up. So that's useful for someone that's just starting out. But installing a plugin that's SEO specific, I always use Yoast SEO personally, and there are other options out there. But it pretty much like you install Yoast SEO and like you're really set up to go.
Yeah, we use Yoast as well. What do you like about Yoast?
One, I mean, it's the biggest one as far as I know. So it's just got all the basics in there, and there are some paid stuff that I occasionally use, but it has all that basic stuff set up for you. And honestly, it was the first one I used when I installed WordPress like 8 years ago, and I have never had a problem with it, and I just keep using it. And they have a great blog, and they have a great product and a great team as far as I can see as well. So so far so good.
What kind of things I think the plugin is free, at least there's like a free tier. To get started, it's free.
Yeah, I think I don't know their business, but probably 95% of people use the free version. Like it's more than adequate.
Do you pay for it?
I do. I pay for a version of it, but mostly because we do a lot of news, and they have a news sitemap plugin, which may be beyond the scope of this talk, but that I really like. And so that's what I pay for. But otherwise, I use the free version.
Okay, cool. So you go into WordPress, you click plugins, a new plugin, you install Yoast. And just like in short, like why would you use Yoast? Like what does it actually do? Is it enough to just like have it on in the background? Like does it just magically kind of make your site better, or is it doing specific things that you should know about?
So you should know that you'll eventually, if you're learning about SEO, you'll hear these things like, oh, you need this. And Yoast will often provide that for you, at least in basic form. So it's like, oh, you need a sitemap, which is just this page on your site that like highlights all of the content on your site. So Google can just show up and visit this sitemap and see your site really easily. So like Yoast automatically creates that for you. And you won't see it, you won't really know it unless you're looking for it, but Yoast does that for you.
Oh, I love that.
They also put a lot of stuff like title tags. What else do they do? Title tags is a big one. They'll set up all your images like in a certain way. So it's not to say they do everything for you, but it's like they provide the infrastructure for you to fill in the rest of the stuff that's important for SEO. And like give you little placeholders. And so you install Yoast SEO, and then every post you go to, you'll see this little SEO tab, and it'll show you like the stuff that you should fill in. And so if you just fill it in as a new blogger or whatever, it'll take care of a lot of the SEO work for you. And definitely all the really important stuff, like it'll get you 90% of the way there by itself.
That's say. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're saying like when you're in WordPress and you're making a new post, it'll be like, hey, here's some SEO like things that you should keep in mind.
Right. Hey, here's your title tag. Hey, put your keyword in, put a meta description in, like all that stuff.
Yeah. Let's say I have a website, like somebody listening has a website, and they're wondering, how do I know if my website is like has good SEO? Is there a way to find out, to know?
There is, but honestly, it's kind of tough because a lot of the tools that you use to look at it have a really high standard. And so like you can run it through like a Google Site Developer, which is Google's own site that will analyze your SEO.
Oh, okay.
And it will, like, I spend tons and tons of time myself as an expert doing this, and it scores you out of 100, and I get like a 70. So if you're like just starting out, like, don't feel bad if you get like a 30. It doesn't mean you're terrible. It probably means you're like everyone else.
Is Google Site Developer, is that the same thing as the site speed tool they have?
Separate from the site speed, but they incorporate those speed findings into the site tool. If you want, in Chrome, this is something they added within the last 6 months or so. If you click on, there's a developer tab, and then there's an audit. And so you can look at each page on your site individually. And it'll throw out all the things relative to SEO that it sees as right or wrong and score you in a number of categories. But like I said, you're going to get a terrible score. Like, and it'll throw, like, if you're a beginner, don't do it because you're going to get so distraught. And it's all this stuff that, like, you really can't fix. Or if you do fix, like, it's going to be so custom that, like, a lot of stuff I could fix, but I don't, because it's just, like, it's going to end up breaking the site, like, because it's so specific. You're like, hey, you need to, like, add this JavaScript after this thing, before this CSS, like, only on this browser, like, blah, blah, like, all this crazy stuff. And I'm sure it would make the user experience, like, 0.03% better, but for the person, we just talked about installing WordPress, like, you should not pay attention to this stuff. And so I would use Yoast as your primary tool and just make sure you're doing the right things in there before you go out and, like, externally start using other tools to analyze your site.
Got it. So in that tool, the inspector tool, I'm guessing you can just right click in Google Chrome browser and click inspect, and then this window will show up where you can, is that how you get to what you're talking about?
Yeah.
In case someone listening, like, wants to pause and, like, check it out right now. Okay. All right, cool. So we're using Yoast. We are doing this analysis of our site using Google Web Tools, you said it was called?
Google Developer Tools.
Developer Tools. I've not used that. I use the AHREFS tool, which is like a paid tool that will break it down. But I guess Google is like a free version of this. Yeah,
it's free and in some ways not as good as AHREFS tools. So that's an example of a site audit tool, which I do think, and it's kind of the same thing in AHREFS where it'll show you a lot of errors. no matter what. And you're like, well, I can't fix all these, but some of them you can fix, where it's like, hey, here's a bunch of links that are broken, which mean like they link out from your site and it goes to nowhere. And so it's like you want to fix those types of things. So I shouldn't say don't do it, but just be judicious in what you can actually approach with your expertise. So like go fix the broken links and make sure they're all fixed, but don't like dive into like the JavaScript if you don't know what you're doing there, that type of thing.
When the web was starting out, let's say, I'm thinking like of course the web started in 1991, but I'm thinking like 99, 2000, 2001, like right around when people really started getting traffic to websites and Google was on board. Google was coming online. There was a lot of hype around meta descriptions, meta keywords, meta tags. Where is the industry now with all of these? And to be specific to anybody listening, if you don't know what those are, they're literally just these HTML tags, which you just write in HTML at the top of an HTML, at the top of every single web page. And it just says like meta description equals. So they're easy to make. And these were like the biggest thing. You needed to have these optimized, blah, 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 blah. Is that still the case?
Yes, definitely. I would say back then it was nice where if you just had them, you had a big advantage, and now everyone has them, or enough people that, you're not going to stand out from the competition. But I always say it's kind of like that, all this stuff on the site, the Yoast SEO stuff, getting it fast, getting it all great in the code. It's like putting on roller skates. But that doesn't mean you're going to go anywhere. Like but you have to have the roller skates on in order to be ready to play,
Okay.
So
it's like spring training. You're getting ready or something.
You're getting ready. Yeah. You put the roller skates on and then you're standing there. And then the other aspect of SEO is getting links to the site. And so that's when you get like a push or go down a hill or whatever. And like you actually start moving. So you got to have the roller skates on to be ready to play, but it's not going to just like take care of everything by itself.
Got it. What are some challenges that you have at your company with SEO right now?
So SEO's got a long, strange history where Google's always changing exactly how it's ranking sites. And I think that the last year, interestingly, has been really tumultuous and that they've changed a lot of stuff and nobody knows exactly why.
But nobody ever knows, right?
No one ever knows. And like, it's like sometimes
sometimes like Matt Cutts is really famous. He has all these. He works at Google and he puts out all these videos over years now, where he'll say, "Here's how to make things work well in Google." Mm-hmm. But I'm sorry, but aside from that, is there anything else? Like Google doesn't really tell you what to do.
They say they do, and it's very general, but then it's so open for interpretation and the algorithm is so complex. So it's like they'll say things like, "You should make really good content." And you're like, okay, great. Hey, I've been doing that. Where are all my rankings? Like, you should, have a great page experience for your users. And you're like, okay, it seems good to me. Like, how are they measuring these things, and what other factors are in play, and all that stuff. This last year, the talk has been this thing called EAT, which is expertise, authority, and trust. And so they're like, especially in like, we operate in a lot of health niches. So Google's like, we want people with expertise, authority, and trust that are associated with the content, right? Sounds easy, but like, what does that mean? How do you establish that your authors or your site or whatever have these qualities? And like, nobody really knows. And Google doesn't tell you how they determine those things. So you try a lot of stuff and you hope. And the big thing that's tricky too is like, you can try a lot of stuff, but it's not like, I try this new tactic and then 3 hours later my rankings go way up, right? It's like you do all this stuff and then 6 months later Google will somehow give you credit and then your rankings will go up. But you don't even know if it was that one thing, or by then you've done 30 things and you don't know which one actually mattered. And so you need to keep a really high level and just consistently do good stuff, and hopefully you're rewarded over the long term. We have been, because we always keep doing a lot of good stuff. But even now, I couldn't be like, these 10 things are the only things you need to do, and ignore those 500 other things I did, because I don't know which is having the impact on our rankings success myself.
So it's like a hard experiment to run because you're doing so many things that it's hard to say this one thing is the thing. Because you also have to wait, you're saying 6 months to even like see the results.
Right. And it wasn't always like that, where it used to be like, I had a site a couple years ago that got mentioned by the New York Times, and 2 weeks later, every ranking went up like 5 spots.
When you say every ranking went up, what are you looking at to see that the rankings went up?
So again, I use this tool AHREFS.
Okay, AHREFS, yeah.
And so in AHREFS, it'll show you like every keyword. So it's like learn JavaScript, learn PHP, learn all these things specifically, and all the variations with like how to code and like all this stuff will have a ranking where it's like if you Google it, it's in position 7. And so when I say rankings go up, it means like I open up AHREFS and it used to be position 7, now it's position 2 or whatever. And ideally that happens for a lot of keywords, and that's when you'll see a big traffic spike because like you suddenly went from 7 to 2 for a ton of keywords.
Mm-hmm. I was so blown away when I started using AHREFS, and this isn't meant to be a commercial for AHREFS, but I really did.
Are they sponsoring this podcast?
Sponsored by. No, but I mean that's what this podcast is about. It's like you know people are starting and they need to know like. In that first month, I think, what are the skills you need to know to be successful in SEO, in this episode. And I mean, AHREFS costs, so it's hard to say that like you should do it if your site's super small, but I think they have a free trial. But all I'm saying is it just kind of really opened my eyes to what's possible with SEO, because they do this audit for you and they will tell you, like we were saying a second ago, they'll show you like all the things that are wrong with your site, as well as your ranking, as well as like keywords that you're really good at, keywords that you're really bad at, but you think you're good at. It's like there's a pretty good smack in the face. It's like it was like an awakening, and it has really actionable kind of steps too. It gives you. Yeah,
it's an amazing tool, really good tool. And what's cool is you can do that for yourself. You can also do it for your competitors, and you can see. All right, well, big competitor to 1 month, what are they up to? And type in their site into AHREFS, and you can see what are they good at. Oh, they have this one page that everyone loves. Oh, right. This one article that's getting like thousands of links to it that I haven't written.
So you can say like all their traffic is coming from this one blog post that's just killing it.
Yeah, and I haven't written that post, so I'm going to go do it. Or I'm going to see who links to it and reach out to those people and tell them about my blog post that I've just made way better. There's a lot of strategic things you can do for SEO around it, both on your own site and by looking at what everyone else is doing in your space.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've learned a lot from you, just kind of shadowing some of the tools that you use over the years with SEO. Another one that you showed me, which I still use, is what's it called? The Google Console, Google Search Console.
Yeah.
Right. And because similarly, that will show you words that you are ranking for on your blog, but maybe not as strongly as you could be. Right. So I mean, a specific example for us would be people were finding our Python course via like a post that we hadn't even written. It was like people were searching for Python versus C++ or something like that. And our Python course, which has nothing to do with C++, was showing up. Right. You know what I mean? So it was basically suggesting like, hey, and if you write this post on Python versus, C++, you're going to get even more people because we think that you are likely to be associated an authority, like you're saying this EAT, an authority on this. We think you are, and you don't know it yet.
Right.
You're just kind of like, oh, I need to be writing about that. I didn't even know that.
That's the number one thing I can tell any SEO person is if you have an established site, it's like people are kind of ranking for a lot of stuff where they haven't written the right article. So if you like you said, you just write the right article, you're gonna. Did you rank number 1 after that, or like at least really high?
I don't think we're right for that one. I think yeah.
It's all lies.
No. I mean, I don't think we didn't write it yet.
We haven't written it yet.
That's because there was another one that we didn't have, which was Python versus SQL. We didn't have.
Yeah.
Which we were also ranking for. That was even higher.
Yeah.
And we did write that, and it just went out this week. So we'll see how it goes.
It's gonna go very high.
I think so.
And it's not always intuitive. Where like I would never consider learning either Python or SQL myself. Like you would
Well, I would
kind of
never
obvious,
think about
right?
comparing the two because they're
not really
different.
Yeah, but people are searching.
People are searching for it.
And we do
and
a
we
lot
have courses in it, so it's like, of course, we'd be ranking as an authority in it. But it was just never. I was just like, oh, why would you compare those two? And it's like, oh yeah, okay. So we did just read that. That was the bigger finding.
Yeah. So that's super, super useful.
And I was just using Google Search Console, which is free. I mean, it was a great tool.
It's my favorite SEO tool for sure. I spent a lot of time in there.
How much time do you spend thinking about SEO? Like, which percentage of your job? I mean, you have a lot of roles. You run a company, and there's like 30 people working for you, and you're doing a lot of other things. But what kind of percentage is SEO, either now or when you were getting started? Like, what kind of role does that play in your success?
It is a massive role. I would say it's our biggest acquisition channel for sure. And
like Google, we're talking. And
Google, yeah. And we spend a lot of time on email and YouTube as well. But a lot of how we use both of those also is how can we make our SEO better? And everything else we do, where it's like, hey, do we want to do this content syndication or this marketing deal? Or should we do a Facebook thing? Like, a lot of it ties into, will it make our SEO better? Because like Facebook by itself doesn't matter to me. But if we have all these social signals to a bunch of our posts, maybe that helps with SEO and it's worth doing. And so it's not to say that we're only like sitting here looking at Yoast SEO and Webmaster Tools, but rather our whole strategy really goes around SEO in a way, and email and YouTube as well. But everything ties back to those three in some way. And if it doesn't benefit those and it doesn't have this massive plus on its own, then we're not going to do it.
So are you saying that like every time you write an article for your blog, you do research to try to figure out what a good topic is going to be?
Not so. I would say we have two types of content. One is evergreen content and one is news.
Okay.
So evergreen, yes, it's always keyword driven, where it's like in a year, I want someone to still be looking for this content. And a lot of it's geared to where you have to see what people are looking for. So my writer, my nutrition writer for Barbend recently wanted to write about the keto diet, right? Which is very, very popular. And he's just an expert on it. He's like, I didn't interview all these experts. I'll make the ultimate expert's guide. But if you type in keto diet, people are just trying to figure out what it is. So it's like keto diet for beginners or keto diet 101 is what he ended up writing. Not because he couldn't write a more authoritative article, or like he would actually enjoy writing a more authoritative article because he loves it, but people want the beginning guide, at least for that search, And so so SEO really informs our strategy that way, in that we want to give people what they're looking for and make sure that people are looking for whatever we're talking about. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is news, and we do a lot of news, and that's more leveraging. And by news, I mean like, hey, this is happening now. It's relevant now. And in a year, you probably won't care. But we write news because we're just really using it as a linking strategy, where it's an interesting perspective, where I think this is one thing that's really separated us, where people like news because it gets them a lot of traffic generally. And, Barbend has over 2 million visitors a month, and a decent bit of that is from news. But traffic's just a vanity metric, really. Because it's like, how are you going to use that traffic to make your site better? And like, how are you going to get to 3 million or 5 million visitors if you're at 2? And news is a tough way to do that. You can't just write more news necessarily and put it out. But we try to like break news or write it very soon after it happens for our specific industry. And thus people will use our news article as a source. And so when everyone else writes news articles, they'll link back to our site.
How do they find you? Do you reach out to them and say, hey, we have news about this topic, or they just organically find you through Google?
A lot of it's just, we'll hit our newsletter with it. We'll show up in Google News maybe, or sometimes we'll get drawn into like a Flipboard or an Apple News or stuff like that.
Does Google News know that something's news versus evergreen content? Like, how does it?
They do.
Oh, it does?
Yeah.
Strange.
And there are little signs you can tell them about it. And Google's very smart about that stuff. They can tell when something's newsworthy just by like other articles that are coming in as well.
Interesting.
And they'll just do testing. Like it might show up as news for 100 people, and then they're like, oh, this doesn't seem like it's news, and they push it off, So Google's always doing that type of
Because
thing.
if you make news, I imagine though, like, if something's about an event that's this week, I imagine that, in 6 months from now, you're not really going to be ranking for that. If it's like a blockchain event and you're like,
yeah, it's over.
It's like
right.
over. Just like you're kind of getting buried at that point. Nobody.
Yeah.
So why would you? I mean, it seems like that's just like a treadmill where you're just like constantly have to be making news. It seems very exhausting.
It is exhausting. And so if your strategy is, I'm a news organization and I'm just want people to read my news and get a lot of visitors, there's no end to this. And there's no end to our news either, but we use the news as a way to attract links to the site. And so when other authoritative places are linking to our articles, then the whole site's authority is boosted, and then we'll rank better for the evergreen
So that comes back to that thing about authority that Google's looking for.
Right.
People are looking to you.
Right. Exactly. And we get incredible links to our news. So it's my favorite link building strategy. You have to really be good at it. But, we get crazy links all the time from like links I would never, ever get if I were just doing outreach or whatever, just because we're a news article. So like, for example, we wrote about this CrossFitter who did something on a rowing machine, like a really good workout. Kind of like a basic thing, like who cares? Well, Row2K, which is an incredibly powerful rowing site, took it and put it on their homepage and linked out to it. And they're like, check out Barben's awesome article. And it was just like the most powerful link we've ever gotten, because we wrote this news piece about it, and it was about rowing. And so news is a great way to cross over between different worlds. Hafthor Bjornsson is the mountain on Game of Thrones. You know this guy?
Yeah, the mountain, yeah.
But he's also like an incredible strongman.
Oh
like he wins every year.
Yo, if I saw the mountain in real life,
yeah.
Holy crap.
He's massive. He's like 6'9" or 6'8", and just
and
huge.
not to mention that he has. I mean, you haven't seen the show, but
I haven't seen the show
because we talked about it. You don't know this, but anyway, I think he has the most horrific scene of the way he kills somebody ever, which anyone watching, I would say it's right around the end of season 3. No spoilers here, but I would just cover my eyes anytime I see him on screen. So yeah, I know that anyway. So that's a
but we'll write about his feats of strength, and then like weird like Game of Thrones enthusiasts will link to it because they're like, look at this guy, and just like it's piled with links.
Well, that's an interesting way to But then like I think there's that Google likes you to be focused on certain keywords, right? So it's like if 1 month if we started, we have our blogs all about learning to code. If all of a sudden we started writing about like food, like wouldn't we just confuse Google? Like does the Game of Thrones links help you, or does it just confuse your brand?
It does help us. The article is all about him like deadlifting, right? So it makes sense. But to say like we get tons of links. So it's like that day we got Games of Thrones links, and the other day we got Row2K links, and then we got like a bunch of news links from other places. So it's a bunch of random links essentially, like that build up into a general authority thing where Google's like, oh, this site is trusted by many, many people. But all of our content's about weightlifting. So, and we get a lot of weightlifting links too from like bloggers and gyms that are sharing our stories. And, it's not just totally random stuff. Most of the links we get are very relevant. So it's just suffice to say, like, yeah, if we were only getting super random links, that probably wouldn't be the best thing. But as part of our strategy, I think it's very useful.
If you were making an SEO course and you had to say like, these are the top 5 things I think that people should, do when they're making new content, what are just some of the basics that, that you think somebody should do? So
the best thing, and I think we've kind of covered this, is that every piece of content you make should be really intentional. Like back in the day, people would just start blogging, and blogging kind of has this air of like you write about whatever you want that day and you don't have any strategy around it.
Yeah.
And if you really want to be successful, like you have to be intentional about what you're writing about. And intentional doesn't mean it's always super keyword focused, but it's like, hey, I'm going to interview this person and they might share it on their social media and I'll get a ton of exposure that way. Or it is keyword focused and and it seems like no one has written this article, and so I'm going to write it so I can be the one that's there writing it. Or like, I think a lot of people would be interested in this for linking to. And so maybe there's not a ton of not a ton of search traffic around it, but I'll get a lot of links. like there's lots of different reasons you would write a piece of content, but I'd say the number one thing is you have to have a reason for every piece.
So think it's kind of like having a sort of empathy toward what is the person looking for, what are they thinking, and then therefore like who might link to it. Just kind of like thinking through other people's eyes. For example, like, if you have I could think about one that we did that was really bad, that it makes me think of what you're talking about. Whereas like I had this thing that five things that product managers, like reasons why they should learn to code. Mm-hmm. But I think I titled it, and this was years ago, I titled it like coding do's and don'ts in Brooklyn, or like something's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I looked back at this years later, I was like, no one's searching for coding do's. Like no one, and that's why nobody found it. And then, as soon as I, changed it to like 5 things that product managers, make it specific,
right.
Focus it in and clean up some of the words around it. Then it became like a really popular article. But at first it was just like me ranting about like, what I didn't like a specific person did. It didn't make any sense.
But it could have made sense. Like a couple years ago, Facebook was super big for driving traffic, and so you'd see all these weird headlines.
I think that's probably where it came from. It was like a story I wrote it up for. Yeah, it was very.
So if you're like, hey, this is going to be an article that I want to do great on Facebook, then maybe that makes sense, and you write it in that certain way. But if your intention was like for a Google search, like no one's going to be Googling anything related to that, and they'll just be confused. So it's like, not to say one is right or wrong, but you have to know what you're planning for it. And like what you did might end up being the great strategy where you had this Facebook friendly title, put it on Facebook, maybe it did great, and then 3 months later you change the title and then it's SEO friendly. So you get the best of both worlds.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, I want to wrap up here, and I just want to leave everybody with a few of your favorite, whether it's like a site or a newsletter or a YouTube page, like where do you learn about this stuff? If you want to learn more about SEO, where would you go?
So my favorite blogs, I would say one of the AHREFS blog is quite good.
It really is, yeah.
I like Brian Dean has a blog called Backlinko, which I think is really good, and he has some courses where he's I think he has some of the best courses out there on SEO, on white hat SEO. Neil Patel, I think, has a great site.
Yeah.
A lot of content on there, and not just SEO, but good stuff on there. And he has a really cool tool, actually, which is called Ubersuggest, which I think is every day he's adding new stuff to it. So it's like kind of an AHREFS competitor, kind of a BuzzSumo competitor.
Is it free or cheap?
It's free, yeah.
Oh, it is free. Because I saw something came out where it was like that he's going to take down AHREFS with this free tool.
Yeah, I think that it's, in my opinion, the best free tool out there by far. And he's always adding to it. It might be comparable to a lot of
so Neil Patel's tool. What is it called? Uber.
It's called Ubersuggest.
Sounds like another company. Uber.
So, I mean, he's got a blog post about it, but it's actually a fascinating thing where it was another company, and he bought it and put it on his website just so he could get links to it.
Oh, that's funny.
He details it in a blog post where it costs him like $100,000 a month to run this Ubersuggest, this like separate company, and he makes no money on it, but he generates so much links to his website, neilpatel.com, that all of his other content ranks. So it's like the most advanced SEO strategy I've ever heard of.
But it's the master.
Yeah, it's like if you have $100,000 to blow a month, then and maybe even more now that the servers are probably running off the charts with all this stuff. But so he does and most of his strategies are much more attainable for the average person. But that was kind of an interesting tidbit there.
Yeah.
So those 3 places are great places to go. I still go to all those places to learn a little bit as well.
Awesome. And where can people listening find more about you or the things that you're working on?
So first place I would check out the Media Mindset podcast. We cover SEO there, but also kind of just general media topics, as well as my company's named JAKK Media. You can see some of my brands on JAKK Media, and I'm This Be Kenny on Twitter.
Sweet. Well, thanks for coming by, Kenny.
Great to be on.
All right, talk to you later.
All right, I want to thank Kenny for coming on the show. All of the show notes and everything will be at onemonth.com. You can check that out on our blog, as well as dozens of other episodes just like this, talking about people and how they learn to code and what they're doing with it. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you would like to take a course with me, if you'd like to learn HTML or CSS or JavaScript or Python, all of these courses and a lot more, as well as a growth hacking course, lots of courses are available, all taught by me and my co-founder at onemonth.com. If you have any questions for me or about the podcast or about the whatever, I don't know, you want to know what I'm eating today or what I'm thinking about? I mean, really? Do you want to know? Probably not. But if you do, I have an answer for you. teachers@onemonth.com is where you can email, and I'll be happy to respond. I hope you're doing well and have a great day. I'll see you in another episode.